we're going to talk about optimizing ketogenic lifestyle triggering musculoskeletal adaptations. So what does that mean? It means exercise that is really optimized for people who are ketogenic, also optimized for people who are not, but specifically people who are lowering their blood glucose and have better insulin sensitivity. The lecture is going to be real short, so I have time for questions. Because I think we're in a small enough group where anybody that has a question, if it's very specific, if you want to ask me about your elbow or something like that, I can answer that. And we got a perfect size crowd for that. So what we're looking at here is I'm a researcher, and I wrote a protocol for a study that was done on a bone density device that I created a few years ago. And this bone density device, the research was being done on some deconditioned postmenopausal females. This device enabled people to compress bone on its axis. So this is the axis of bone, end-to-end compression. And when the individuals would undergo this compression, the bone would actually slightly distort, and the bone would then spring back into position when this load exposure was done. It was then stimulated for minerals to come in and remineralize bone density that had been lost, and even building bone density higher than it had ever been. So this was very interesting from a data perspective other than the bone, because while we saw massive bone adaptations, what we found was that these deconditioned postmenopausal females were putting 6, 7, 8, 9 times their body weight through their hip joint. So think about your body weight, multiply that 6, 7, 8 times. Now, coincidentally, just when this study was, just when it was starting, there was another research study that was published out of the United Kingdom also, which talked about the minimum dose response of how much load is required to trigger bone growth in the hip. This is a very exciting study, probably one of the most important things that's ever been written about in bone density academic literature. And what they determined is they took accelerometers, like what you have in your phone, and they taped it to people, taped accelerometers to the hip joint, and then they gave them regular blood tests to see if they were growing bone or not. And then based on the accelerometer data, they'd be able to determine who was actually triggering bone and who was not. And so in an effort to, what's the minimum level of load we need to undergo before we start triggering bone growth? Turns out it was 4.2 multiples body weight. So if you're training and you're using 3 times your body weight, which by any weightlifting standard would be tremendous, you're not doing anything for bone, because load just needs to be higher. Now, gymnasts get this on a regular basis by hitting the ground. So with acceleration, you combine that. And so that was the impetus for the device. But now that we had the opportunity to have a slow and controlled environment and expose force through this bone and see what even deconditioned people were capable of, what I did was compared that to what clinical data was out there for loading. So I went to the American College of Sports Medicine and looked at some of their data tables of what do people naturally put through their bone mass when they lift weights. It turns out from an inexperienced to experienced lifter, it's 1.3 to 1.53 multiples of body weight. So nowhere near 4.2, which explains why so many people who regularly exercise don't really build bone. But what was equally as impressive, and here's where I made a very new observation, was, okay, if humans, by comparing these two sets of numbers, what that's saying is a human is 7 times stronger here than they are here. So when you lift a weight, is a static weight a waste of time? Because we're holding a weight in a place where we're limited by the weaker range. That's why we call it the weaker range. So what do we know about that range? We're firing the least amount of muscle, and we have the greatest chance of joint injury. So do we really want to load that area, or do we want to load out here and then maybe change the weight so that it's a medium weight here and maybe a really light weight here, so we can bypass joint injury, put more force through muscle, take some of the risk away, and get incredibly more benefits? So if you look at what has been done with rubber band training, there's a place called Westside Barbell in a small town in Ohio, and they've broken more than 140 world records. And the way they've done it is they've done a lot of different things, but one of the primary things they use is what's called accommodating resistance, what I call variable resistance. And what they do is they attach bands to existing bars and have some load on them. So the weightlifter would take some of the weight off, put some bands on, so they'd hold X weight here and maybe 1.2X here. But based on what I was looking at with the research that I was doing in London, okay, no, we need X here and maybe 5X here or 6X here. So I knew there was something that we needed. We need to forget about the weight, and we need more variance. And this gives us the chance of something that is far more effective and will really help out the people who may not be in the best condition or may not have the best biomechanics, because the risk is so much lower. So what we know, this variable resistance has been used in rehab for years, right? You go into a physiotherapy facility, and you see latex rubber products all over. Like anybody who's had a shoulder injury, you do outward rotation, and they hook a band up to like a rack, and you're doing this. Well, that's great for very small tendons, ligaments, musculature. The problem is that if you want to make that variable resistance heavy enough to where it's going to be relevant as an exercise, you got rubber that's twisting your joints, and you can cause an injury. So that's not solving anything. Or it'll just be so painful you won't actually be able to accomplish the objective. And anybody who's been in a gym and looked at one of the pull-up assist bands, they're really strong. You try to do a curl with that, and it'll be very uncomfortable, and you won't be able to complete anything that you would refer to as an effective exercise. So now we need to protect joints and build a system that's going to give us the advantages without the disadvantages. So when we look at, now I don't want to get like too super technical, but this is where this dovetails with ketogenesis. So we look at phase one of what someone is doing in a movement like this. I'm just going to use the chest press as an example, because not all of you can see my feet, and a squat wouldn't look pretty good for the people in the back. You wouldn't know what I'm doing. So in a chest press, let's say I am going to a hyperloading position here where I'm handling more weight than I would normally bother to use or get underneath on a chest press type of movement. So I'm going and using my strongest range, and then when I fatigue that strongest range, I'm not fatiguing it because I ran out of the fuel system in the cell, the ATP, glycogen, creatine, phosphate. I am going to a level of structural fatigue. Because if I do it and then stop just in that position, and what we see with the bone density devices, same thing. It's not the fatigue from the level of fuel, it's the fatigue from the actual cell not having enough contractile material to complete the contractions under a given load. So this is when the actin and myosin come together, and guys, some of you remember that from bio class. Now, when it comes to phase two of what we're doing, and we change the range of motion. So let's say I'm doing this activity, and then I can't get to this place where I'm contracting the entire muscle, where I'm in the optimum position because the weight is so high. Then I shorten up the range of motion, and I do half repetitions with a lower amount of weight. So I'm fatiguing all ranges of motion simultaneously in one experience, which this is where it really applies to keto. I'm wiping out the stores of ATP, glycogen, and creatine phosphate far deeper than any other type of exercise would, because I'm able to fatigue each range of motion, diminishing, going from most efficient to least efficient. This is something you cannot do with a weight. So it's depleted to a greater degree, and we all know what happens when you deplete to the most extreme degree. You go into gluconeogenesis. So this is where your body doesn't have any glucose, You've wiped out the glycogen stores, which primarily are in muscle. So now the body needs glucose to survive. So what happens? Well, the body starts using the deepest level of ketosis, which would be a phase called gluconeogenesis. So this is when protein starts getting converted to glucose. But the best part about this is it's on a demand basis. So that means if you have a cancer cell that's looking for glucose, the cancer cell doesn't communicate with the central nervous system and ask the rest of the body for nutrients. It's going to grab whatever's there. But if what is being triggered to be secreted already has a receptor site for the simplification just for the lecture, well, it's basically it's created when it has a home, so that this bypasses the cancer cell completely. And so somebody can still be high energy. Somebody can still be converting energy and getting lean and fast and having all these benefits of gluconeogenesis. And they're having more rapid ketone use, while at the same time, they're not going into any negative phase of anything. Now, I want to show you what I'm talking about, because that's a lot more exciting than showing you a picture of what I'm talking about, or nothing at all. This was supposed to be like that color orange, but, So, yeah, thank you. Yes. Go whatever team has burnt orange. Okay, sure. Yeah, them. Yeah, awesome. My favorite team. So I'm not from Texas. I'm from the future. What? Yeah, okay. So this can be arranged in a whole different configurations of different exercises. There's like a plate that you put to protect your ankles from having them bend inward, because you really want to have that when you're using a heavy load. But this is the way we are biohacking, getting heavier load with very low risk. So here I am. This is a band that's going to deliver 500 pounds when my arms are at extension. But right here, this may be 100 pounds, which is light for me. Now, everybody picks a different band. It's not like, 500 or nothing. If I ever have kids, that's what I'm going to say to them. Someday I'll be old enough for that. Okay, so I'm going to extend my arms. So I'm holding a tremendous amount of force here, but I'm under next to no exercise risk. I didn't have to warm up for this. And I get to the point, which is right about here, where I can't get to extension. Now I'm fatiguing the mid-range. And I do that until I can't get there. Then it might be just a 1 or 2 inch repetition. And that's the whole session. That's chest training for 48 hours. So very simple, a much more targeted approach to training a muscle, and then of course amplifying the effect with a ketogenic diet. I've had tremendous results. I would have put my before and after pictures, but typically when I lecture, I don't put hokey stuff in there like that, because it's just pictures. I don't want to talk about that kind of thing. But I put on about 45 pounds of muscle, and I've lost a whole lot of fat. I didn't start tracking it in the beginning. Dave Asprey has had some of these similar effects because he was one of the first testers of it. He had a prototype, and same with a whole bunch of others. And then we've had so many different testimonials from applying this method with faster weight loss, greater muscle gain, and you tell them out of breath. Just greater effects. And then time is another thing. You know why people don't work out? It's not because they're lazy. It's because they don't have time. So very few people in their 20s will skip their workout who are interested in working out or have interest in it. But why do we start skipping in our 30s and 40s? It's because we have kids. We have work responsibilities. I'm trying to tell everybody in the whole world, you're not lazy. You just don't have the time. And so when you can ram more work down into a shorter period of time strategically, it's not a hurried workout. So like if anybody saw like the 6-minute abs and then the 4-minute abs, that was just a really poor form workout where they just did exercise in a hurry. That's not efficiency. That's sloppy. But what we're doing here is we're actually getting more force through the muscle in a safer and more controlled way. And the greater the stimulus with a shorter period of time is actually more effective to the human body. So if you think about if you have a light abrasion on your hand for a long period of time, you get a blister. But if you have a strong abrasion for a shorter period of time, you get a callus. An exposure to the sun on the 4th of July, you might only have to be outside for 15 minutes and you're going to have an effect. Whereas on Christmas Day may be sunny, I'm sure it is here. It seems to be only sun here. So when you look at that, it could be Christmas Day and you're not going to have an effect on the skin. So what I want everyone, this is one of the big takeaways, is greater amount of work strategically in a shorter period of time is actually a more intense stimulus and will create a greater effect. What questions do I have? Yes?
I guess I just have a very basic question to start at the beginning. You've gained 45 pounds of muscle. You would have already been a pretty muscular person before that. Why would you want to gain 45 pounds of muscle?
Why would I want to? It's more like I'm a scientist and I want to see what could happen. But I also wanted to gain 45 pounds of muscle.
Okay.
And I don't know. I want to see how good a shape I could get in without going through a lot of exercise risk. And I knew I would try harder than anybody else, so I didn't want to grab somebody else and say, okay, like I'm going to apply it exactly how I write it. And even now that like this is available for people, a lot of individuals sort of just do it their own way, in which I don't recommend. But I can't control that. I knew for myself I can control that environment. Now that's not a study; it's a sample size of 1, but it would give me the reinforcement of having collected this library of clinical literature and looking at it and saying, okay, according to all the data, this is what's going to happen, but now I'm going to test it myself. And that's a better, I think a more relatable thing for most people. Now, I'm also not female, so I wouldn't expect 45 pounds of muscle to show up on females. We have different, lots of stuff. So if that's kind of where you're going with that question, no, it's not going to happen to you. But there's a lot of amazing conditioning that happens. Another thing that you'll see happen with this type of therapy is you're holding a higher weight in a position where you normally not be able to even get the weight there. And you have to self-stabilize this. So you saw when I was doing that chest press, my hands were kind of shivering. Well, that's stabilization firing. And myself and Henry Alkire, who's holding my camera back there, hi. He and I did a meta-analysis last summer. And does everybody know what a meta-analysis is? Does anyone not know what a meta-analysis is? Okay, so a meta-analysis is when they take all the information, all the published academic literature on one subject, and you use statistics to normalize it so you can compare and weight the different studies to try and come up with a more definitive answer in medicine or sports performance or whatever. And so what we really discovered was that stabilization firing has a huge effect on growth hormone upregulation. So what does that mean? That means you're losing body fat very quickly. Now, what increases stabilization firing? Anybody? Force, weight. So, like, I can stand here with my knees bent, and there's a little bit of tonic contraction that's going on in my core. If I stand here with my knees bent and you hand me a 100-pound bag of rocks, there's a whole lot more going on in my core. Part of the reason that CrossFit athletes get leaner is, you notice I didn't say in better shape. I said leaner. So they're triggering a lot of this effect. So when you're doing Olympic lifting and there's so much off balance that you're recruiting a lot of these stabilization firing episodes, and especially in rapid succession with more weight. Now, there's some risk associated with that. So with what I'm trying to get people to see is the stability firing in a very safe environment with the variable resistance. So you get the benefit of that growth hormone upregulation, which, by the way, with the very high loads and the stabilization firing, you can get over 2,000% secreted in about 5 minutes. Just the stability exercise, and then do the pre to post test. And so we found 23 different data sets to be in this meta-analysis. So that's another huge effect. So when I'm doing like an overhead press type movement with this therapy device, my hands are over here, and because I'm holding whatever's relevant to me to be heavy, like my whole body has to be stabilizing, and that has a huge, in turn, with first growth hormone, then a lipolysis effect after that. Yes?
So I started down this journey as pre-diabetic. I'm reversing my pre-diabetes with resistance training and body weight motion. And so what I think I heard, and I'd like you to confirm and maybe expand a bit on it, what I think I heard is you're saying that because of your variable resistance training, you deplete my glycogen stores more completely in all of my muscles so that I become more insulin sensitive as a result of using your tools and techniques.
That's a beautiful summary. That's right.
Okay. Can you also do something that can help me with becoming better fat adapted and recruiting more triglyceride and fatty acid metabolism in my muscles as a result of depleting my glycogen through your model?
For the same reason. So that you'd be using the glycogen that's in the muscle faster, therefore any that's circulating would be used immediately, and then any deficit you would go into gluconeogenesis. So your body would start creating it out of protein on a demand basis. So that would drive you into that gluconeogenesis faster. And of course, you would do something like this on a daily basis, so you'd be getting that effect, on the regular. Back there.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I came in a little late, so I missed the beginning.
Okay.
Are you the services? This is intriguing to me. The services you're offering is the equipment, the training, and then the second question I think you began to answer it's more than just one exercise that you exhibited with the chest exercise. Is there a routine? So again, you may have addressed that in the beginning. I didn't hear that.
So when I present, I really just talk about research. There is a booth here that has the product at it. Yeah.
Okay.
But your second question, yes, there's a movement for every part of the body.
And how does one access the ability to do that? Is it in a coaching relationship? Buying research?
No, there's videos online.
Oh, all right, okay.
Yeah, and it's really, so there's like a poster that has all the exercises, but I tell everybody you really have to watch the videos because there's nuances in movement, right? Like you wouldn't be able to teach somebody how to swing a golf club by showing a picture.
Yeah, certainly.
Right? You gotta, so the videos are really
Thank you.
Yeah, perfect. And there's orange right here. I like the orange.
Thank you. I match your slide background.
Yeah, that's why I like it.
My question was along similar lines, actually. I wanted to ask specifically for the females here about glutes. Do you have a movement specifically for increasing gluteal hypertrophy?
I'm so happy you asked that question because I can stop a whole restaurant with my loud voice and talking about cellulite reduction based on hamstring growth and glute growth with this therapy intervention, and like the restaurant just goes silent. Apparently the guys aren't saying anything anyway, but but like instantly everyone's like, wait, what did that guy say? So yeah, I understand where you're coming from. And so one of the reasons why even leaner females have some visible, like loose skin cellulite, let's just call it, is because they have underdeveloped hamstrings and underdeveloped glutes. So where are we getting hamstring development? It's more hamstrings than glutes. And what happens is the best way to develop hamstrings is a deadlift. So when you're picking up something heavy off the ground and then coming up with it, right? Well, that's dangerous on the back if you're doing heavy deadlifts, and so women know that, and so they don't want to do it. And now with this system, you can have it be heavy where you're stronger and not heavy where you're not strong, and thereby reducing the risk of injury and increasing the gain. And so, yes, you do. You take that bar. You wouldn't take that particular band, but there would be a band that'd be right, and then the plate that protects your ankles, and then so you'd go through that same range of motion until you couldn't get to the top anymore. You'd go, let's say, halfway, and then you do maybe another 10 repetitions, and then your last few, you just completely exhaust at the bottom. But like one set, one experience, and that's it. And you'll see changes very quickly. Yeah. That answer the question? Okay. Yes.
Actually, my question sort of was around deadlifts. So one of the things that I was surprised and interested in you speaking now is about the stabilization. So with deadlifts, I find that I have to engage and have that stability in order to hinge. So with stabilization, with what you're talking about here, what are the pros or cons versus a traditional deadlift for stabilization as far as this approach that you have with the variability?
So it would be the same. It would be the same effect, same stabilization. It would be more so in the stronger range, however. So what you would be handling at the top or near the top would be, if you chose the right band, more than you would handle in a fitness environment. It wouldn't feel like more because you have 7 times the capability there of what you probably would normally pick. So like, for example, sometimes I'll tell somebody, oh, like, when women ask me the question, they say, how much weight is this? I go, I'll tell you after you're done. Because if I told them how much they were lifting, basically I know what they're capable of and they don't. Because we're 7 times stronger. So it's basically whatever you normally lift and then multiply that by 7. That's what you can really handle. So, but it's in the very specific range of motion. That's kind of the impact rating range of motion, like here, or when my knees are just slightly bent, and you can apply that geometry all over the body. But so the stabilization firing is far more in the stronger range, and thereby the greater the effect. Right. Principle same, more force causes more stability. And that's why I gave that example. I can stand here with my knees bent and there's a little bit of tonic contraction in my core. But if I'm holding a 100-pound bag of rocks right here, like let's say I'm doing yard work, my mother gardens and she puts me to work all the time. So holding a 100-pound bag of rocks, well now my core has to be a lot more activated and therefore the greater effect. Yeah, yes.
So you mentioned recovery, and as you get older, as I do, recovery doesn't happen as fast.
Sure.
So does a ketogenic or a low insulin lifestyle help with recovery or hurt recovery? Because if we're draining our muscles of everything in your process, and that's a good thing. Mm-hmm. That also means there's more that has to come back in, and both for repair as well as for refilling. Is this slowing down my recovery process, or what should I be looking for to help find whatever is my recovery process at that time?
So a few things are different with a ketogenic individual who's doing this. Number one is you have less cellular inflammation. So your recovery time is going to be lower as a result of that. And that's not just what we're talking about, that's like everything in the building today. The second thing is a lot of what people perceive as exercise soreness is really just joint damage. So we get comments all the time when somebody uses the device and they say, I don't understand, I used it and I did like an incredible amount of work and I'm not sore. And I say, yeah, like what you think is lactic acid and what you think is exercise soreness is you're kind of beating up on your joints. And so you don't, and you can run the experiment where if somebody does like what are called like lockouts for deadlifts, you can double the amount of weight or triple the amount of weight you normally handle, and then you just, you have a power rack and you hold, and you're just doing like top range like this, you won't get sore from that. And so that's kind of symbolic of, okay, it's the joint damage. So you have less inflammation, and you ultimately are you're not getting to a place where you're beating up on the joints, so that takes less resources that are being processed by the whole body, so you're better off in general. Now, it doesn't seem to matter the age when it comes to muscular recovery. There's been a biopsy study that was done, it was a long time ago, but for some reason the training industry hasn't picked up on it. But within 36 hours, you're recovered from training a muscle. I know there's like theories that say you should only train a muscle once a week, or you should only do this. But from a muscular perspective, bone's different. Bone has a very different metabolic rate. So if you're doing like some kind of bone stimulus, this guy's an expert right here. You can't do that very often. That may be a week that you want to wait in between load exposures. But from a regular muscle, your recovery rate and my recovery rate not going to be all that different. Yes.
Hi, I've been doing a ketogenic diet for the past 9 months and also doing strength training for over a year. And I'm not improving much. My goal of gaining at least 10 pounds of muscle mass has not yet been realized.
Okay.
I've been monitoring myself at least every month on the electrolytes, the stainless
Bioimpedance.
Yeah, the scale with the stainless plates, which I heard earlier. Someone said that it's not really that accurate. So anyway, my question is, how will I be able to gain at least 10 pounds of muscle? And follow up is, I think I'm an ectomorph, so does it matter or not?
Yeah, being an ectomorph is when you're just kind of at a high caloric use advantage. You have a faster metabolism, and you don't put on muscle very easily. Yeah, that may fit you, but that also fits this guy right here in the blue shirt, and he's gained 15 pounds of muscle in how long? In 6 months, right. So ultimately, and a lot of body composition changes, you're leaner and everything. So there's probably a couple things going on. You may not be eating enough. One thing with ectomorphs I notice is they don't seem to be all that hungry very frequently. Right. You have to look at counting macros. I'm not the biggest fan of that because your central nervous system is appropriating different nutrients in different ways all day, every day differently. So like if you had a burn like on your arm or on a different part of your body, the resources that would require to heal are like tremendous. And actually, you like lose bone density when you're burned. Most people don't know that. So like, that's kind of an interesting cocktail party fact, right? So well, it's just most people wouldn't know that. And so like when I talk about how like smokers are damaged from the smoking and then they have compromised bone density, it may not be the tobacco. It may just like be the burn of the lungs, and because that pulls a lot of resource, pulls a lot of calcium out of the bone tissue. So now my point with that is a lot of things going on in your body that you will never be made aware of, but you got to count like how many calories you're taking in, and don't worry about if you're ketogenic, you don't really need to worry about the macronutrients. as much, and we're really only concerned with 2 and keeping 1 low, so that's pretty easy. But if you're at a caloric surplus and you're triggering the body in the way that we're describing, I would be shocked if you didn't get that 10 pounds of muscle you were looking for. And with the people, we have like thousands of people that are using this now, and it's brand new, like just came out. Already thousands of people who are giving us that kind of feedback. Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It could be a bone density issue. You ever had a DEXA scan? No. Oh, that's right. There isn't. Well, it's a good thing you're in Texas today. They got that here. So yeah, you could take a DEXA scan. How old are you? You ever had any like chemical poisoning kind of thing? Ever been on a medication that had a bone density challenge associated with? You don't need to give me your medical history here if you don't want to. No. No, the antibiotics doesn't count. Okay. Yeah. I think that there's a lot of inefficiency built in what we would call strength training, and this is why not everybody gets the same or similar results. The weak range and the strong range is a big deal. Some people have a tendon layout where they have more access to muscle in the weaker range, and therefore they end up being better athletes because of a tendon ligament arrangement, because they can grow more muscle. But like with what we're doing here is we're completely taking that out of the equation. And so it's worth a shot. You know, there's no negative side effects. Yes?
I just have a quick comment to make about what you just said. You mentioned the antibiotics, and I read quite a lot about the gut biome, so it could be that you want to heal your gut, and maybe that will make a difference. So I did quite a lot of reading about that.
Yeah.
So I have the converse problem to you, actually, in that I did literally 1 month of CrossFit, and my quads kind of expanded, which is quite unusual for a female, but it was quite annoying because all of my skinny jeans failed to fit after that. But I wondered whether you have a different protocol for females who are keen to not gain bulk, but also gain strength rather than gain bulk.
Right.
With your system?
So there's a couple different approaches to that, and what I would tell the female, this is actually like some traditional weightlifting advice that's like pretty accurate. If you stay high reps, you can accomplish that. If you stick towards the stronger range of motion and kind of ignore the weaker ranges of motion, so you would probably do something more like this. Now, an ultimate thing would be for you to go to an OsteoStrong center. Where do you live? Do you live here?
I live in Cambridge, UK.
Okay. It's a long drive. But yeah, so there's going to be one in Mayfair, which is not really near Cambridge, but certainly a lot closer.
1.5 hours then.
Right. It'll be worth it. You only need to go once a week. So that wasn't a joke. That was like serious. So like that high level of exposure to load and just the strong range of motion. This is the bone density device I was talking about. So like OsteoStrong would be a place where you would build very powerful muscle without the size. And again, there's some ways you can do it with X3, but OsteoStrong would be a better tool for that.
And just one unrelated thing is that it occurred to me that astronauts would benefit greatly from your training system, since there's no gravity in space.
Yeah, I've been talking to multiple people at NASA. In fact, there was a few I was talking to on a regular basis, and some actually using some of my inventions. And they're a big organization, and it's hard to get them moving in any different direction. But once they do start moving in one direction, you can't stop them. So it's okay. I have some good friends there. And especially so the bone compression is something that we've been talking about specifically, what they have at OsteoStrong. but also just from a general musculoskeletal perspective, they're not. So my research was looking to hypercondition deconditioned people. So not just get them out of osteoporosis, but get them to a point where they have bone density so high they may never need to worry about it again. They might be able to do therapy for 2 or 3 years, and their bone density would be so high that they could just not worry about it. And that objective was accomplished with this, with very low risk. And then with this, it's the same kind of thing. It's like we want absolutely rapid muscular engagement, muscular growth, very short period of time. The problem is NASA, their mindset is not that they want to hypercondition anybody. They just want to keep these guys from falling apart. So my retort to that has typically been, with everybody I talk to, okay, we've got like the best here. There's a lot of research that supports what we're talking about. So let's get it going down on that path. So they're still trying to emulate like regular training, which isn't as effective as what I'm talking about. So it's a longer conversation, but it's okay. We're talking to the right people. Yeah. Yes, in the back, and I think that's actually you're right here. You haven't asked a question yet, and I think this is the last one.
All right. You talked about pain after workout earlier. When I work out, I'm in a lot of pain. It's really, really bad. I don't think that's normal. Do you have any ideas on what that could be?
Is it local pain? Is it right to, like, if you exercise the bicep, is it pain here, or it's
Yes.
just, okay. Is it in the joint, or is it in the middle of the muscle?
It would be in the muscle.
Okay.
Although the ketogenic diet helps with that.
Okay. You may be more prone to inflammation. Have you ever taken an IgG panel? Hang on, let her hang on to the microphone just one more second.
No.
Okay. You may have a food allergy.
Oh, okay.
That's causing some chronic cellular inflammation. But ultimately, we'll have you try this tomorrow.
Okay.
You're going to be here tomorrow?
Yes.
Yeah. We'll have you try that tomorrow, and then, the next day, see if you're sore. See if you're sore later that day. Yeah. And I'll make sure you go to absolute exhaustion. It'll be the hardest, whatever we decide to train, workout of your life.
Okay.
And I think I know what's going to happen is you're going to feel fantastic.
All righty.
Yeah, great.
Thanks.
Okay, I'll stick around. Do we have another session after this? I don't think so. Anybody who has another question, you can come right up here. Thanks.